IELTS 16, published by Cambridge University Press and Cambridge Assessment English 2021. Now turn to Part 1. Part 1. You will hear a man phoning to find out about some children's engineering workshops. First, you have some time to look at questions 1 to 3. Now listen carefully and answer questions 1 to 3.
Hello, Children's Engineering Workshops.
Oh, hello. I wanted some information about the workshops in the school holidays.
Sure.
I have 2 daughters who are interested. The younger one's Lydia. She's 4. Do you take children as young as that?
Yes. Our Tiny Engineers Workshop is for 4 to 5-year-olds.
What sorts of activities do they do?
All sorts. For example, they work together to design a special cover that goes round an egg, so that when it's inside, they can drop it from a height and it doesn't break. Well, sometimes it does break, but that's part of the fun.
Right. And Lydia loves building things. Is there any opportunity for her to do that?
Well, they have a competition to see who can make the highest tower. You'd be amazed how high they can go.
Right.
But they're learning all the time as well as having fun. For example, one thing they do is to design and build a car that's attached to a balloon, and the force of the air in that actually powers the car and makes it move along. They go really fast too.
Okay, well, all this sounds perfect.
Before you hear the rest of the conversation, you have some time to look at questions 4 to 10. Now listen and answer questions 4 to 10.
Now, Carly, that's my older daughter, has just had her 7th birthday. So, presumably, she'd be in a different group.
Yes, she'd be in the Junior Engineers. That's for children from 6 to 8.
And do they do the same sorts of activities?
Some are the same, but a bit more advanced. So they work out how to build model vehicles, things like cars and trucks, but also how to construct animals using the same sorts of material and technique. And then they learn how they can program them and make them move.
So they learn a bit of coding.
They do. They pick it up really quickly. We're there to help if they need it, but they learn from one another too.
Right. And do they have competitions too?
Yes. With the Junior Engineers, it's to use recycled materials like card and wood to build a bridge. And the longest one gets a prize.
That sounds fun. I wouldn't mind doing that myself.
Then they have something a bit different, which is to think up an idea for a 5-minute movie and then film it, using special animation software. You'd be amazed what they come up with.
And of course, that's something they can put on their phone and take home to show all their friends.
Exactly. And then they also build a robot in the shape of a human, and they decorate it and program it so that it can move its arms and legs.
Perfect. So, is it the same price as the Tiny Engineers?
It's just a bit more, £50 for the 5 weeks.
And are the classes on a Monday too?
They used to be, but we found it didn't give our staff enough time to clear up after the first workshop, so we moved them to Wednesdays. The classes are held in the morning from 10 to 11.
OK, that's better for me, actually. And what about the location? Where exactly are the workshops held?
They're in Building 10A. There's a big sign on the door. You can't miss it. And that's in Fradston Industrial Estate.
Sorry?
Fradston. That's Fradston.
And that's in Grassford, isn't it?
Yes, up past the station.
And will I have any parking problems there?
No, there's always plenty available. So, would you like to enrol Lydia and Carly now?
OK.
So, can I have your full name and...
That is the end of Part 1. You now have half a minute to check your answers to Part 1. Part 2. You will hear the managing director of a company called Stevenson's welcoming a group of work experience students. First, you have some time to look at questions 11 to 14. Now listen carefully and answer questions 11 to 14.
Good morning everyone and welcome to Stevenson's, one of the country's major manufacturers of metal goods. Thank you for choosing us for your 2 weeks of work experience. My name is Julia Simmons and since the beginning of this year I've been the managing director. Stevenson's is quite an old company. Like me, the founder, Ronald Stevenson, went into the steel industry when he left school. That was in 1923. He set up this company when he finished his apprenticeship in 1926, although he actually started making plans 2 years earlier, in 1924. He was a very determined young man. Stevenson's long-term plan was to manufacture components for the machine tools industry, although in fact that never came about, and for the automotive industry, that is cars and lorries. However, there was a delay of 5 years before that happened, because shortly before the company went into production, Stevenson was given the opportunity to make goods for hospitals and other players in the healthcare industry. So that's what we did for the first 5 years. Over the years, we've expanded the premises considerably. We were lucky that the site is big enough, so moving to a new location has never been necessary. However, the layout is far from ideal for modern machinery and production methods, so we intend to carry out major refurbishment of this site over the next 5 years. I'd better give you some idea of what you'll be doing during your 2 weeks with us, so you know what to expect. Most mornings you'll have a presentation from one of the managers to learn about their department, starting this morning with research and development. And you'll all spend some time in each department, observing what's going on and talking to people, as long as you don't stop them from doing their work altogether. In the past, a teacher from your school has come in at the end of each week to find out how the group were getting on, but your school isn't able to arrange that this year.
Before you hear the rest of the talk, you have some time to look at questions 15 to 20. Now listen and answer questions 15 to 20.
OK, now I'll briefly help you to orientate yourselves around the site. As you can see, we're in the reception area, which we try to make attractive and welcoming to visitors. There's a corridor running left from here, and if you go along that, the door facing you at the end is the entrance to the coffee room. This looks out onto the main road on one side and some trees on the other, and that'll be where you meet each morning. The factory is the very big room on the far side of the site. Next to it is the warehouse, which can be accessed by lorries going up the road to the turning area at the end. You can get to the warehouse by crossing to the far side of the courtyard, and then the door is on your right. Somewhere you'll be keen to find is the staff canteen. This is right next to reception. I can confidently say that the food's very good, but the view isn't. The windows on one side look onto a corridor and courtyard, which aren't very attractive at all, and on the other onto the access road, which isn't much better. You'll be using the meeting room quite often, and you'll find it by walking along the corridor to the left of the courtyard and continuing along it to the end. The meeting room is the last one on the right, and I'm afraid there's no natural daylight in the room. Then you'll need to know where some of the offices are. The Human Resources Department is at the front of this building, so you head to the left along the corridor from reception, and it's the second room you come to. It looks out onto the main road. And finally, the boardroom, where you'll be meeting sometimes. That has quite a pleasant view, as it looks out onto the trees. Go along the corridor past the courtyard, right to the end. The boardroom is on the left, next to the factory. OK, now, are there any questions before we move?
That is the end of part 2. You now have half a minute to check your answers to part 2. Part 3.
You will hear a conversation between John Gray, a study support advisor, and 2 students, Wilson and Grace, who have study problems. First, you have some time to look at questions 21 to 26. Now listen carefully and answer questions 21 to 26. Thanks for coming along, Grace and Wilson. My name's John Gray, and I'm one of the study support advisors. As you're new students and have asked to discuss what we can do to help you with your study problems, I'd like first to outline the purposes and approach to learning support here at Broadway University. Then I'll ask each of you to describe the sort of issues you have and then say what we might offer you. Is that okay?
Yes. That's fine.
Okay, let's start then. Well, basically our purpose at Student Support is to help students to become more independent. We do this by showing them effective strategies they can use, not by doing the studying for them. Another purpose is to help students to understand some of the cultural differences between their own culture and the cultural context here in this country. In that sense, we are encouraging students to make comparisons, but not to make judgments about them. I suppose a final purpose is to help students to build relationships inside our culture by encouraging them to relate openly to us. That's enough from me. Perhaps Wilson, you could talk about the sort of study problems you're having and I'll suggest some options.
Well, my main problems at the moment seem to be connected with writing rather than lectures or seminars.
Okay. Could you say a little more about what your problems with writing are exactly?
Well, I find I can't understand the assignment titles. They're often unclear to me. I mean, the central ideas or what is sort of underneath the title words. Then usually I can't find enough readings or make a good enough plan.
Well, we have a special session that looks at essay planning in each academic area. You're in business, aren't you? So maybe you could come to the business essay session.
Well, that would be great.
Anything else about your writing?
I find that the structuring of the essays I write is a real difficulty for me. My essays are always very disorganized.
Well, on Tuesdays during each semester we have essay writing sessions, and you can make an appointment with a tutor to discuss your essay draft. Would that be helpful?
Yes, it sounds good.
Before you hear the rest of the conversation, you have some time to look at questions 27 to 30. Now listen and answer questions 27 to 30. What about you, Grace?
Well, my problems are a bit different. I'm having great difficulty following the lectures in my nursing course. The lecturers seem to come from different countries, and they talk really fast and are not always very clear. I can't keep up, and I end up with very poor lecture notes.
Have you tried recording the lectures?
Yes, but I still can't understand them. It just wastes time.
Well, you might try talking to your course coordinator to see if some of the lecture notes are in PowerPoint form, or whether the lecturers have notes they can give you. Or you might ask one of the local students to let you look at their notes and discuss the lecture with you.
I'd be a bit embarrassed to ask the lecturer.
Well, one of our support staff can contact the lecturer for you if you like, to start with.
Oh, okay, thank you.
Anything else that's a problem?
Well, this isn't really a study problem, but I'm finding that I'm not sleeping well.
I'm sorry to hear that. Is there something you're worried about?
I'm worried about the course. There's too much information to deal with. Also, I had an email from my parents recently saying that my grandmother's not well, and I'm worried about her. I feel I should go back to be with her.
Sounds as though you need to talk to someone who can listen in more detail to this situation. We have some really good counsellors from different cultural backgrounds. I know you might not feel comfortable about this, but I could help you make a time today if you like.
I'm not sure. It's all rather new.
Okay. Why don't you think about it and come back to see me again this afternoon?
Okay, thanks. I'm so sorry to be a problem to you.
You're not a problem at all, Grace. We're here to help.
That is the end of Part 3. You now have half a minute to check your answers to Part 3. Part 4.
You will hear part of a lecture about effective management skills given by a business studies lecturer. First, you have some time to look at questions 31 to 40. Now, listen carefully and answer questions 31 to 40.
Today, in my final talk on effective management skills, I want to discuss with you ideas connected with the place of emotional intelligence in the workplace. In recent years, management researchers have realised that an organisation is not just a place with a structure, with bosses and workers and rules, but is a place where feelings can have a huge impact on the effectiveness of work and workplace relationships. First of all, then, what is emotional intelligence? Well, no doubt you all know about intelligence tests, IQ tests, and the usual measurement of intelligence. Well, it has been realised that there are other types of intelligence which can be vital to the tasks of management. Emotional intelligence, or EI as it is sometimes called, is one of these. Basically then, EI involves a range of abilities connected to feelings. For example, it involves self-awareness, or in other words, the ability to be aware of your own emotions as you experience them. Another dimension of EI, naturally enough, is the ability to recognise other people's feelings, or at least to imagine what other people are feeling under certain conditions. We sometimes call this ability empathy. Then there is the ability to manage your own emotions and to manage them in a positive and constructive way, thereby helping to motivate yourself. Finally, EI involves the ability to manage relationships, which involves the positive management of other people's emotions. And this last ability is part of being an effective leader, as well as being linked to being personally popular, or, as we say in plain English, just knowing how to be good with people. It doesn't take much of your or anyone's intelligence to realise how important all these qualities are to a happy and open workplace. A workplace where people communicate openly, trust and respect one another, feel valued and understood, and thus work well together, is more productive and probably more creative. But quite a number of otherwise intelligent and technically competent managers are not emotionally intelligent, and this means they need to learn these interpersonal skills in order to become more effective at their jobs. So what underlies our emotional intelligence? What feeds into emotional intelligence and enables it to be developed? Clearly, a key part of being emotionally intelligent is our own view of ourselves, how we see ourselves, or as it is sometimes called, our self-image. With a positive self-image, which means if we like ourselves, we are probably more able to support other people in our relationships with them. So, managers with good self-images are more likely to be a positive influence inside any organisation. But self-image is neither completely straightforward nor simple. Basically, there seems to be three central aspects to how we see ourselves. First, there is our perceived self, which basically means what we think we are like. Our internal view of ourselves in our mind's mirror, if you like. If we value ourselves and have high self-esteem and self-confidence, then other people will feel this in us and will feel a little of it in their relationship with us. Then there is how we would like ourselves to be, which is sometimes called our desired self, and obviously refers to the gap between what we perceive ourselves to be and what we think is missing in ourselves. What improvements we would like to make in ourselves, if you like. For example, many shy people would like to be more assertive. But obviously, if we have too much desire to change ourselves, it probably means we may not like ourselves enough the way we are. Finally, There are the selves we present to others, our public faces if you like, or as sociologists express it, our roles. Roles involve expected forms of presentation of self, a bit like parts in a drama or a play. For example, if you are a manager, your staff will probably expect you to behave in a certain way because this is what they expect of you. For example, you may be expected to give clear instructions and to make good decisions. Through the effective acting out of their work roles, managers can partly control the impressions other workers have of them, either gaining face if these workers build a positive view of them, or losing face if they behave in unusual ways, perhaps at the same time losing their authority. Of course, these three aspects of self-image interact. In other words, they operate together at the same time, not in isolation. Research seems to suggest that there is a degree of stability in the main ways we communicate, or in our styles of communication, if you like. So overall then, a good manager needs a good self-image. And a good manager needs to be able to build and use emotional intelligence. A successful modern organisation cannot ignore these psychological needs if it wants to succeed.
That is the end of Part 4. You now have 1 minute to check your answers to Part 4.